Update 6.4 is out now and has brought us 5 new refines to talk about. Today we'll be going over new skills for Aversa, Selkie, Tibarn, Ylgr, and Spring Veronica. We'll discuss what each refine does and talk about some build ideas and their general playstyles. First up is Aversa, a flying red mage heroic rare unit and one of our best Grand Hero battle rewards. She isn't the deadliest unit, but her ability to apply mass, debuffs, and panic made her quite solid for 8th raids when it was just getting started. Aversa's Knight did get some changes. It still grants a flat plus 3 res and at start of turn if any foe has 3 less HP than Aversa and that foe is adjacent to another foe. Inflict -4 to all stats on that foe plus inflict the panic status on them. Additionally, at start of combat, if Aversa has more than 25% HP, she inflicts -4 attack, speed, and res on the foe during combat. So, no huge changes to Aversa's Knight debuffing ability. The only buff it got is that it now inflicts -4 stat debuffs instead of -3. The extra effect gives Aversa some extra in-combat debuffs to utilize. For the special refine, at start of combat, if the foe has more than 75% HP or has a penalty active, inflict penalty on foe's attack, speed, and res during combat equal to 4 plus any current penalty on each of those stats. So essentially, to not a huge surprise, Aversa also gets the Pledgian effect. It activates off a penalty or when the foe is healthy, so even if the foe has no debuffs active, Aversa can inflict -4 attack, speed, and res. With the base part of her weapon, this means Aversa can now inflict -8 to everything but defense on the foe, and that's if they have no other debuffs active. Where things can get nasty is if her -4 field buffs do land. At that point, Pledgian kicks in to double down for another -8 to attack, speed, and res, and in total it's -16 to those stats. This can go higher if panic is also active on the foe's field buffs. This is why Aversa can be extremely powerful. Panicked field buffs stack with regular debuffs and both are going to contribute to the Pledgian effect. Let's say the foe has a +6 field buff but gets hit by Aversa's Knight. Their +6 turns into -6 and it stacks with the -4 attack debuff for a total of -10 attack. If Aversa attacks that enemy, her Pledgian effect would inflict -10 attack and you add another -8 attack from the flat in combat debuffs. -18 attack in combat plus -10 attack field debuffs gives you a very annoying -28 attack overall. Don't get it wrong, Pledgian and Panic together are devastating. Overall, some may be disappointed with this refine because they really did not boost Aversa's support capabilities. It still has an HP check, a position check, and if the foe neutralizes penalties, then it really does nothing. While Aversa gets a ton of combat power herself, if she fights and takes a hit, then she may not activate her weapon's debuffs the next turn. I'm a bit disappointed they didn't make it so the refine always checks Aversa's max HP. In terms of playstyles, you have some choices to make. Aversa's Knight still needs to win an HP check, meaning you need to build HP or risk not proccing the weapon against tankier foes. You then have other factors like Summoner Support, Marriages, Dragon Flowers, and Legendary / Mythic Blessings where things can get really messy. Aversa has 42 base HP, and while that's not bad, I would definitely still suggest having one HP boosting skill. Unfortunately, you either have to run HP +5 or one of the mixed HP skills, or you have to splurge for Red Dole Flying 4. Not the best stat booster, but Aversa needs that HP for her support power. Whether you go with 1 or 2 or no HP skills, Aversa probably won't win the HP check in high NPV content. You could still use her without the debuffing part of her weapon if you bring good old attack and res menace. You can even use it regularly since Aversa's Knight may not hit solo units or everyone in general. Pledgian plus menace skills just synergize incredibly well. Another thing I want to mention is using Aversa on debuff focused teams. Think Gunther, Reed, or broadleaf Fan Daggers. Her AoE panic plus debuffs can help out, and now her refined combat power, Aversa could be a solid red unit for those types of teams. If you summoned on the Hero Rises banner, maybe you have some speed and res far trace fodder, that would be fun. Pair that with attack and speed catch or Swift Sparrow for your typical offensive mage build. If you want some survivability to its stack with Aversa's attack debuffs, then you could run Sturdy or Mirror Impact, maybe attack and defense or attack and res solo. A cheap B skill can be a breaker skill that can help Aversa punch through to wary fighter type effects on certain tanks. I like Axe Breaker personally. We discussed how taking hits kind of kills Aversa's Knight's debuffing portion, so Desperation could help just transition into a regular offensive unit for later fights. For C skills, Aversa can run Reigns, but maybe the 3 space speed and res hold could work too. More debuffs for your teammates doesn't hurt. Another penalty she can bring is Pulse Smoke for specials. You could also run regular stat smokes for higher debuff values. Last, if you still mainly want Aversa for her debuff plus panic combo, then you can just run support skills like air orders, guidance, or stat boss. Nothing wrong with that. Overall, not a surprising direction for Aversa's Refine since she is Pledgein, but I was hoping for some extra penalty effects to continue being a good support debuffer. She is still a good choice if you want to panic and debuff clumped up enemies, but you have to win those HP checks. Giving her better combat prowess is fine, but if she does fight, then you risk losing HP, thus losing the HP checks afterwards. Like I said, I do think she is a good pick, or red pick, for debuff focused teams now that she has better damage output herself. She would definitely be happy with other Pledgein users like Gunthra. Next unit we have is Selkie, who is a blue beast cavalry unit. Selkie has always been a bit weird as a res comparing unit, and this refine has a few interesting things to discuss. Foxkit Fang has gotten some changes. It still grants a flat +3 res, and at start of combat, if Selkie has more res than the foe, she gets +4 to all stats during combat, and also gets bonus stats equal to 80% of the difference between res stats from the start of combat. Maximum of +8 to all stats. She has the Cavalry Beast transformation bonus, which did not get any buffs. When transformed, she gets +2 attack, and when initiating, she inflicts -4 attack and defense and prevents a follow-up attack. So first up, Foxkit Fang still requires a res check but got rid of its awkward melee only restriction. Before, Selkie needed to have 16 more res than the foe to get the maximum +8 stat boost. Now she only needs to have 10 more res for the max boost. Important to note, the res comparison uses the at start of combat values, which means you only include flat stats, field buffs, and debuffs. Selkie wants to increase her res with skills like Fury or buffs like Fortify res. To make things more complex, we have the Refine portion. If unit initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, grants +4 to all stats during combat, and Selkie gets extra effects based on how much more res she has than the foe. If it's greater than 1, she gets guard. If it's greater than 5, she gets offensive no follow-up. All of this is great, however, I do not believe the +4 res from the Refine helps Selkie's first res check. Again, you have to win that via on-field stats. Now, where Selkie can use her +8 to all stat bonuses is for the second res check in the Refine. For the second res check, this is where all in-combat boosts are fair game. Selkie must win by 1 res for guard or 5 res for offensive no follow-up. Okay, so I hope that mostly made sense. Let's try to summarize though. Basically, Selkie wants to win the first res check at start of combat, and she can get +8 to all stats plus another potential +8 based on the initial res difference, up to +16 total stats, and then she does a second res check during combat to essentially get a mixed phase flow guard. Combine all of this with the beast transformation bonus, which is like a mini impact effect, and you have a rather deceptive unit. In terms of base stats, Selkie has good speed and decent base starting res to do her checks. 38 with Foxkit Fang isn't too bad, however you want to bump up her res as much as possible. Her other stats are unfortunately not great at all. 35 base HP, 29 attack, and 19 defense is not good for a melee unit. There is a reason Selkie can get so many bonus stats, because besides speed and res, she is struggling. In terms of builds, Selkie is another unit where you have to make some choices. She needs flat resistance to activate her base weapon, and that's how you get the massive +8 stat boost if you have 10 or more res. You can get the general flat res boosting skills like Fury or Fortress Defense and Res, but we now have an interesting option in Defense and Res Menace. Generally, most units will waste part of the Menace debuffs since they only target 1 defensive stat. Selkie, however, you can use the -6 res to her advantage because with the +6 res field buff she gets, that's a 12 res advantage in her favor, and you can use that to activate Foxkit Fang. She then appreciates the +6 defense and the -6 defense debuffs, providing extra damage, which she does need. Menace skills activate perfectly with melee cavalry units, so this can be a good self-sufficient way to give Selkie the flat res she needs while being able to run in-combat skills like Surge Sparrow or Attacking Speed solo. Additionally, because Selkie can get Flow Guard and the mini impact effect, she's in a really good spot to initiate. She can simulate full no follow-up, which is great, and she can run both Near Trace Kanto or the low B skills. Very interesting builds you can pull off, but again, this assumes Selkie wins that initial res check, or I guess the second res check. Now, while not exactly the best use of the Beast Cavaliers, Selkie could be a res tank for your Beast teams. With the transformation bonus, it is easier to run Beast units with fellow Beast allies or dragons. If you want to run multiple beast units, one of their problems is a lack of ways to deal with mages. A lot of beast units just have terrible res stats, and since Foxkit Fang no longer restricts Selkie to melee fights, she's free to be your distant counter mage tank. You can run distant stance for extra res, lulls to disrupt field boss, and the joint C skills for extra stats. One issue is that a lot of mages also have high base res, so if you do not stack enough flat res, Foxkit Fang may start to struggle. Last, there are some alternatives I want to discuss. If you don't mind shorter fights, Selkie is free to run Double Fury, that's +6 or +7 flat res, and she could use all the other stats as well. Maybe pair this with Desperation for a very cheap budget build. Another budget option is Sabotage Attack, because Selkie has it by default. Maybe not the best slot to take up, but it's fine. If you wanted to put together a solo build, that you could borrow Ylgr's Speed and Res solo in the A slot, and then use Rouse Attack and Res from Spring Soleil. You have the Sacred Seal slot open for customization. Overall, very interesting refine with some pretty solid effects. The main issue is getting enough flat res to boost or to use Foxkit Fang to its fullest, and then trying to make up for Selkie's pretty low HP attack and defense. Like Aversa, Selkie's going to be a unit that would be much more consistent with max investment. All the flat res from merges, summoner support, dragon flowers, and a res boon will make a difference. In general, if you do invest in Selkie, I think utilizing the player phase nature of Cavalry Beast is the best option. Having a mixed phase flow guard is amazing since it opens up contour low combos, and it can be nice for enemy phase usage as well. If you're looking for an unconventional unit, Selkie definitely fits that bill. Third unit is going to be Tibarn, who's a red flying beast unit. The Hawk King is a fun initiator with its potential 3 movement and a popular guild forcer. Hawk King Fang got a relatively simple refine, but it's still very effective. With the base part of the weapon, it still grants a flat +3 attack, and if Tibarn is transformed or the foe has more than 75% HP at the start of combat, he gets +5 attack and defense, and he makes a guaranteed follow-up attack. Before, Tibarn only got a follow-up attack against full health foes and when initiating, so this is a good change. Enemies can be hurt slightly, or Tibarn just needs to be transformed. He gets the follow-up attack in the enemy phase as well, which is pretty good. For the refined portion, at start of combat, if Tibarn has more than 25% HP, he gets +5 attack and defense again, and +1 special cooldown charge per attack during combat. Alrighty, so for those keeping score at home, Hawk King Claw's refine is basically just Ephraim's Flame Sigmund with alternate conditions. Tibarn gets +10 attack and defense, a follow-up attack, and free special charge for every action. This is better than Heavy Blade, and it frees Tibarn from needing that Sacred Seal for Gale Force. Pretty simple weapon and deadly when transformed since Tibarn gets 3 movement. While his player phase is even better now, Tibarn now opens the door for some enemy phase action as well, at least against physical damage foes. Like we mentioned with Selkie, the resistance is not a strong suit for many beast units, and Tibarn gets no help in that department. He is focusing on attack and defense, and extra special charge is always strong. In terms of playstyles, Tibarn will continue to be a great Gale Force user. He no longer needs Heavy Blade, but he must take a counterattack to get 5 charges. This is less of an issue once Gale Force gets going, but he can't just 2-tap foes with Dive Bomb like his Pirate ult can. Now, we've gotten some great skills since Tibarn's release. He can utilize Near Trace for Kanto, and you can replace the Heavy Blade Seal with Attack and Defense solo for more stats. Tibarn has 30 impact naturally, which is perfectly fine. However, you're free to replace it with Attack and Defense Catch 4 or Solo 4. Since he has enemy phase follow-up attacks, the mixed phase stat boosters are worth using now. While stacking more attack and defense is fine, Tibarn's refine did not solve his issue with no follow-up. Basically a problem for all slower units who depend upon follow-up skills, but Tibarn does have some speed to work with at 31 base. It's not the worst, but if you want, you can just speed stack to put pressure on slower units. Tibarn can naturally break through wary fighter effects on super slow units, but speed stacking can help pressure the middling speed units. Obviously, you're not going to catch up to the pure speed demons. For C skills, Tibarn can go with the consistent rain options. Attack and defense rain with attack and defense near trace is fantastic for even more firepower, but you can also just take speed options if you want. If you want an alternative, attack and defense menace is available for bigger stat differences. Last, let's go over some budget options. If you don't have near trace, Desperation is still a good option for the Birdman. It procs off his follow-up attack, and it's not like regular Tibarn has super strong synergies with Dive Bomb. You could run Dive Bomb plus Quick and Pulse for 2-hit Gale Force, but Pirate Tibarn basically does the same thing. One reason I thought Float Guard's effects were amazing for Selkie is because beast units can't run Float Guard. Would have been really amazing for Tibarn, but you only got regular guard if you don't want to eat a special. To be fair, he could just tank a bonfire maybe if you have enough defense. But if you want to bypass wary fighter skills, you're gonna have to outspeed. Now that I think about it, the new tempo skill would have also been pretty cool for Tibarn, but that one is infantry only. Next, since we no longer need heavy blade, you could replace it with IO's shield. Tibarn will have a ton of defense to tank an arrow in the knee, but obviously countering is still going to be an issue. Last, since we have attack and defense snag on a Grail unit, you could try it out. Not a must use, but you could mess around with it. Overall, pretty basic refined, focusing on attack and defense with the very nice extra special charge. Like the Ephraims with Flame Segment, Tibarn can have a much more interesting enemy phase on top of his top tier player phase. While Gale Force is his bread and butter, nothing is stopping you with going with Dragon Fang or Ignis. Both are going to proc in his second hit unless guard is involved. Tibarn has a very fun new skill in Near Trace and the Reigns. I did wish the Refined sort of played with the idea of easier transformations. The Ylgr's Royals basically could be permanently transformed in their games, which is one reason Tibarn is such a monster. I think it would have been neat if the Refined let him transform on turn 1, no matter who he was next to, so you always got the 3 movement out of the gate. Regardless, decent Refined for the Hawk King. He still has a clear weakness to magic, but if you can get up in his face, he's ready to brawl. Fourth Refine is a pretty wild one, and it's for Ylgr. Lots of things to talk about for this blue infantry drag unit. Sylgr got some nice changes. It grants +3 speed and at the start of combat. If Ylgr has more speed than the foe, or the foe has more than 75% HP, she gets +5 attack speed during combat and deals extra 2 damage per hit, equal to 50% of her speed stat. First off, Sylgr's speed check uses flat stats, just like Selkie's res. However, unlike Selkie, Ylgr can completely forgo this check if the foe has more than 75% HP. This is a big factor since Ylgr doesn't necessarily have to stack flat speed with skills like Life and Death or Fury. Now, if either condition is met, she gets +5 attack and speed, up from +4, and completely new is the bonus true damage part of her weapon based on her speed. Ylgr is a pretty offensive unit, so more damage doesn't hurt. For the refined portion, inflict attack, speed, defense, and res -X on foes within 3 spaces of Ylgr during combat. X is equal to the greater of Ylgr's current field boss or the foe's current debuff on each stat. Separately, at start of combat, if Ylgr has 125% HP, she gets another +4 attack and speed. So this is a very interesting ability. To put it simply, Ylgr has a hold AoE debuff, but for all stats. The value of each debuff is equal to the higher value of Ylgr's field boss or the foe's debuffs. As an example, if Ylgr has +6 attack and +4 speed, she would inflict -6 attack and -4 speed on the foe. In the same situation, if the foe had a -7 attack debuff on them, that would be the highest value, so she would instead inflict -7 attack. Important to understand is that if you use the foe's debuffs, then these values can change for every enemy. If Ylgr has the highest value on her own boss, then she'll inflict the same value. In situations where either Ylgr's field buffs get neutralized or the foe's neutralizes their own penalties, there's still a chance for this AoE debuff to proc. The enemy must have both abilities to fully stop this effect. That said, the ideal situation is for Ylgr to be fully buffed, the enemy to be fully debuffed, and then Sylgr tacks on extra debuffs in combat. Like we mentioned with Aversa, if the foe has debuffs and panicked buffs, then things can get out of hand. It's even worse if you have a pledging weapon that is facing an enemy within Sylgr's range. Ylgr is actually a really good teammate for those debuff heavy teammates, and that includes Gunther and Harid with their personal debuffing skills. Gunther's Chilling Seal 2 slaps someone on the enemy team with -7 to all stats. If they fight within Sylgr's range, they get hit by another -7 to all stats. If they fight Gunther in the range of Sylgr, she gets another Plagian effect to stack on top. It's pretty disgusting stuff, and since Sylgr has a 3-space AoE, Ylgr can stand behind her front line and provide the debuffing zone. As a dagger unit, Ylgr can apply -7 defense and res after attacking, and a fun mention is Hellbindi. He can buff himself and Ylgr with +5 to all stats. Ylgr can then take that and inflict -5 to all stats on enemies that come toward them. There's quite a lot of potential for Sylgr's Refined, but it doesn't change the fact that Ylgr herself is pretty much pure offense. Unfortunately, while +9 attack and speed and extra 2 damage is great, Ylgr would still appreciate skills like no follow-up to guarantee a double. You then run into the issue of Ylgr having pretty low defense and res with no hope from her weapon, and she has to take a hit if the foe is countering. Unless you run something like Sturdy Impact, Ylgr's only protection is if Sylgr applies an attack debuff on the foe. This is doable via attack and speed menace. Like with Selkie, it can help win a speed check if necessary, but if you fight healthy foes, then Ylgr just needs to worry about outspeeding the enemy. Menace applying a -6 attack debuff means Sylgr attacks on another -6, and the same goes for speed. In fact, with her +6 speed buff, this is a total difference of 18 speed altogether. Since Menace applies buffs and debuffs, this also gives Sylgr 2 ways to activate in case the enemy neutralizes one or the other. Next, I want to discuss a new skill coming on the upcoming banner. Speed and Defense Tempo is a B skill on Mini Mia, and it's inheritable by all infantry units. It inflicts -3 speed and defense and provides no guard and no special charge. This could be interesting for dagger units who want to proc lethality. It's a lot of work for Ylgr, but it is possible. With Time's Pulse, you bring lethality to 3 cooldown, a Flashing Blade proc brings it to 1 cooldown, and then when you get hit, that's going to charge lethality in time for Ylgr's second attack. The benefit of Tempo is being able to ignore guard effects, but as a B skill, you're going to give up important other skills like no follow-up. Generally speaking, you want a weapon and kit with 1 or more of Slaying for permanent cooldown, special charge like Flashing Blade or Time's Pulse, or no follow-up to double and proc your special. Volk, the lethality assassin, has all 3. Ylgr has none, hence this is a bit scuffed, and again her defense and res are not great for taking a hit. If you wanted to run the above build with Tempo, all infantry dagger units can use the Courtly Fan or Vicious Dagger to then add partial follow-up into their kit. Let's get back to Ylgr and Sylgr. While you are not forced to win the flat speed check anymore, Life and Death or Fury are your options if you feel the need to go there. Obviously, I would be hesitant to suggest Life and Death when Ylgr has no other defensive abilities, and she has no way to avoid getting hit unless you run something like Vantage, Desperation, or Windsweep. Generally speaking, if you want Ylgr's Refine to provide support, you should try to fully buff Ylgr or debuff the enemy, maybe both to be safe. Ylgr can take matters into her own hands with self-buffing skills like Attack at Speed Oath or Rouse Speed and Defense. Joint Hone Bust can help an ally, and Attack Smoke could complement the Dagger 7 debuffs. There is also the Rally plus Ruse combo for team support, but I do think Ylgr should be focused on her own combat more. While I do think Sylgr is interesting in a team environment with say some far or near safe army units, Ylgr lacks some important tools to keep herself safe. I don't think a couple of attack debuffs are enough to save her for longer battles, so unless you can 2-tap enemies who don't fight back, or you build a ton of defense and res, you should probably try to end things pretty quickly. Last up we have Spring Veronica. She's a flying green mage who is actually back on a rerun, but I think she should be on another banner for this refined batch. Spring Veronica is a pretty typical offensive mage, decent tag and speed, terrible defense, and some res on hand. Her unique tome, which I would just call the egg, got a big overhaul. It grants +3 speed in that sort of combat. If Veronica has more than 25% HP, she gets plus for all stats during combat, and she gets bonus attack equal to the total bonuses on the ally with the highest total bonuses within 2 spaces. Dang, so before this egg was a very basic +4 stat boost above 75% HP, didn't even work with Desperation. But that HP condition is the standard 25% now. In addition to some stats, Veronica is going to get Ashura's Ally Blade Tome effect. Basically, instead of boosting her attack via the total buffs on herself, Veronica uses the field buffs on her allies. If an ally has +6 attack and speed, she gains +12 attack. Veronica didn't just study Ashura's Tome because the refined portion states, at start of turn if unit is within 2 spaces of an ally, grants +6 attack and speed and the warping status to Veronica and all allies within 2 spaces. Then, if Veronica is within 3 spaces of an ally, she gets another +5 attack and speed during combat. Yeesh. So this refine basically takes Ashura's weapon and her C skill. Not only does Veronica get the Blade Tome effect via her allies, she also buffs herself and those allies. Ashura is strong because she gets no panic, which is obviously good to have with this type of effect. However, Veronica is going to grant the full-on warping status, aka the Order's buffs that Harmonic Catria gives. To be honest, just giving out essentially free +6 attack and speed and warping to anyone nearby is top tier stuff. But Spring Veronica also just adds a ton of attack and speed on top of this. She's another glass cannon, but dang does she give her teammates some good benefits. It might be concerning our main antagonist / rival is studying the tools of the Goddess of Order, but if she's on your side then all good. Like Ashura, the main benefit of having the Blade Tome effect use ally field buffs is because low effects are everywhere, which basically render Blade Tomes worthless. Veronica needs to stay near her team, but she is rewarded with an incredible amount of damage potential, and she can definitely just one-shot anything without high res or damage reduction. With the warping status, Veronica may be next to teammates often, so you may not want to run solo skills, although they could work. If you want to shrug off attack and speed debuffs, you can use attack and speed unity, but for the highest attack speed boost, you can go with a catch for A skill. Pair that with Blade Session for the highest amount of attack possible. To play into the one-shot build, you can then run Speed and Res for Trace and Rain for another -7 res on the enemy. Far Trace may be tough to utilize for Kanto, but it's there nonetheless, and Mage Flyers don't really have a ton of other options. Sadly, Veronica has no way to get offense with no follow-up, so all her extra speed may go to waste on tanks. She also has no way to deal with damage reduction unless it's dodge users, where her extra speed can render dodge useless or at least hinder it enough to still get her a one-shot. Now, since Veronica's Tome grants so much extra attack and a good amount of speed, you could try the more niche skills like Steady Impact. Maybe if you want to stack some res or defense, you could use defense variants of Bonds, Forms, or even the catch skills. She gets plus for defense and res from her weapon, which is better than nothing, but I wouldn't expect her to tank much. If you really want to play into it, you could also use attack and res variants for Far Trace and Rain. If you're looking for special cooldown, then all you got is Heavy Blade. Luckily, that should be an easy proc with the Blade Tome effect active. Now, to ensure Veronica has the max amount of bonus attack, you do want to buff the team with defense and res field buffs. She gives everyone +6 attack and speed, and if you run flyers, then Fortify Flyers actually fills in the rest with +6 defense and res. If you want to buff non-flyers or mixed teams, then you could do double tactic buffs with defense and res tactic. You sacrifice Veronica's own power though. Another option is defense and res link, because again, not a ton of B skills to utilize anyway. It's a bit awkward to use unless another ally moves Veronica first. If you got nothing else, good old Desperation is there, like always, for any glass cannon build. I will also mention Cho Res simply because Veronica has it by default. Overall, Spring Veronica got a pretty amazing refine. She may be worth keeping simply for the fact that she has a very stupid, easy to use +6 attack and speed field buff and warping for the team. Sure, it's no triangle attack, but literally everyone appreciates +6 attack and speed. The fact Veronica then stacks more attack and speed with the ally Blade Tome effect just makes her a deadly unit. If you get doubled with the fully stacked Blade Tome, you're probably dead, although again, Veronica has no access to no follow-up, no way to reduce damage reduction skills, and her ability to take a hit isn't the greatest either. She wants to get the jump first and does require a little bit of planning to get the most out of her. Luckily, the team-wise mobility buff can solve this issue and make things annoying for the enemy in general. Very happy with this refine, and Veronica is proving she can indeed cooperate with some friends. That will be it for this update 6.4 refines video. Will you be using any of these new weapons? Let me know your thoughts or share your builds in the comments. Next video, it's going to be covering this year's Kids banner, and like usual, it's a pretty spicy group of new units. I will be working on that, so until then, thank you for watching, and be back soon.